one session.
Hey, what's up guys, Stan here, and after a longer than usual holiday break, and a few health scares along the way, don't worry, I'm fine, I'm finally back to give my in-depth thoughts on Super Mario Sunshine, a game that I've surprisingly never played before. As always, I've made sure to experience this game in both its original form and the remake, though I'd be lying if I said that I didn't put most of my time into the Switch port, something that I'm sure many others have been doing since the 3D All-Stars pack released. So major shout out to my friend Neon for hooking me up with his GameCube copy, and I hope you guys enjoy my take on Super Mario Sunshine. After the global success of Super Mario 64, Shigeru Miyamoto, the revered director behind gaming's most popular series, began production on a proper sequel as early as 1997. Internally referred to as Super Mario 64 2, this follow-up adventure was originally developed to make use of Nintendo's failed 64 disk drive peripheral, and featured a new format and camera that would allow two players to simultaneously control both Mario and Luigi with no on-screen interference. However, by the time 1999 rolled around, Miyamoto began discussing Mario's 3D potential on a next-gen console, teasing ambitious concepts such as the Red Plumber moving seamlessly around spherical platforms in low-gravity environments. And at Space World 2000, gamers everywhere would finally get a glimpse of these elements during a tech demo for Super Mario 128, which seemed destined to revolutionize the platforming genre once again. But after an entire year came and went with virtually no new information released regarding the highly anticipated project, Nintendo EAD stunned fans at Space World 2001, where instead of Mario 128, spectators were met with something much more familiar. Primarily directed by Yoshiaki Koizumi, 64's assistant director and 3D animator, Super Mario Sunshine was officially slated to arrive on the Nintendo GameCube sometime in 2002. And to the shock and dismay of many, virtually none of what had been shown off only 1 year prior seemed to be present in the long-awaited sequel. Given the bait and switch, audiences were confused by this sudden announcement. However, Miyamoto assured fans that although this new GameCube title wouldn't feature the busy gameplay from the original demo, that this was still a core Mario adventure, with all of the polish and creativity that players had come to expect. And on August 26, 2002, 2 years after the original Space World debut, Super Mario Sunshine was released in North America to an overwhelmingly positive response. Though maybe not as trailblazing as its predecessor, many critics applauded its colorful environments, wide sense of scope, and most of all, Mario's new pal Flood, an aquatic addition that strengthened both Mario's movement and combat abilities alike. At the time, many journalists even referred to Sunshine as the best Mario game ever made. However, despite this overwhelming praise and a fairly strong opening sales week, Super Mario Sunshine would go on to sell a modest 5.5 million copies during its lifetime, less than half of 64's impact, with Nintendo themselves stating that the game had failed to meet their internal expectations. Now, whether these numbers were due to Sunshine not releasing as a launch title, or the GameCube's failure to compete sales-wise with both Nintendo's previous systems as well as Sony, who at the time had a sizable stranglehold on the home console market thanks to the PlayStation 2, the fact was that at that time, Sunshine was considered a bit of a black sheep within its own series. After all, Super Mario was the most successful and celebrated video game franchise in history, and despite its well-regarded reputation and millions of adoring fans around the world, something about Sunshine had failed to catch on in the mainstream in the same way as many of the Crimson Icon's other more industry-defining offerings. In fact, aside from a 2-hour session at a friend's house back in 2003, I had never played Sunshine until this review, which is sort of strange considering that Galaxy, this game's immediate successor, is my second favorite video game of all time. It's not that I was purposely avoiding it, it's just at that time, like many others during that console generation, I was more enamored with rival masterpieces like Halo and Grand Theft Auto Vice City. So when I eventually picked up a GameCube on sale 5 years after Sunshine's release, I bought a Wavebird controller, a memory card, and Super Smash Bros. Melee for my brother and I, and that was it. It would be years until I'd finally get my hands on stuff like Wind Waker and Mario Kart Double Dash, and to this day, releases like Luigi's Mansion and Metroid Prime have still somehow managed to elude me. Though it could be argued that when it comes to Sunshine, Nintendo hasn't exactly gone out of their way to make it accessible in modern times, waiting more than 18 years before finally re-releasing it as a part of the Super Mario 3D All-Stars pack, which is how I was finally able to play this cult classic. And praise the Lord, because along with giving it to us in gorgeous widescreen, something they could have done with 64 but chose not to for some bizarre reason, they actually enabled GameCube controls for this one, allowing me to get the full 2002 experience. But the question, as always, isn't how it played back then, but rather how does it feel to play Super Mario Sunshine today? Does the game still hold up? Is it as challenging and relentless as so many others have already discussed? And most importantly, Am I a chuckster? Well, strap on your rocket nozzle and take a leap of faith as we blast headfirst into this shockingly robust story. Surprisingly enough, when it comes to storylines, Super Mario Sunshine arguably has the most sophisticated narrative within the entire core series of games, boasting new characters, multiple cutscenes, and even featuring full-on voice acting for many of the principal cast. This latter edition actually caught me off guard the first time I watched the title scene, and immediately made me question why it took the Zelda franchise another 15 years before taking a similar approach to its presentation. Regardless though, our story begins with Mario and Princess Peach on an airplane, excited about a much-needed vacation to Isle Delfino. This tropical paradise is home to a warmer climate, beautiful beaches, and the Piantas, a group of multicolored humanoids native to the island, who make their series debut in Sunshine. However, as our hungry hero dreams of seafood galore, hopefully that's not Pianta meat, the princess notices something off about this seemingly perfect venue. At multiple points, she notices what appears to be an odd Mario-esque figure parading around the island in what genuinely feels like the start of some kind of horror movie.
Excuse me,
But before she can make sense of who or what this shadowy figure might be, our group of weary travelers find their dream vacation spot covered in some sort of radioactive sludge. And as Mario begins to feel the uneasy eyes of the Piantas watching his every move, he stumbles upon a talkative contraption that refers to itself as a Flash Liquidizer Ultra Dowsing Device, or FLUDD for short. Yes, this mechanical marvel is in fact the water jetpack shown off during Space World 2001. And after strapping it to his back, the pudgy platformer rolls up his sleeves and makes quick work of the graffiti-covered airstrip, obtaining a Shine Sprite, Isle Delfino's source of sunlight and this game's Power Star equivalent, for his custodial efforts. However, before our protagonist has time to process the day's events, he's soon apprehended by the town's police. And after spending some time in prison, Mario is eventually sentenced to clean up all of Isle Delfino and recover its 120 Shine Sprites before he and his royal posse are allowed to leave. The good news is, FLUDD seems to be the perfect partner to hose down this pain-filled paradise. But before the two are able to do much of anything, Peach's early fears are realized when she's kidnapped once again, this time by the mysterious Mario impersonator responsible for polluting the island. And after following the shadowy figure through a handful of paint-based portals and recovering multiple Shine Sprites along the way, it's eventually revealed that this translucent doppelganger is none other than Bowser Jr., heir to the Koopa Kingdom. At some point before the game's intro, this tiny vandal somehow got his claws on a magic paintbrush designed by the same inventor as FLUDD, and using this wish-granting tool disguised himself as our hero in order to ensure he was rotting in jail while he rescued his Mama Peach.
Mama Peach? I'm your mama?
Yeah, that's right. Mario's most iconic enemy and the Mushroom Kingdom's greatest threat has not only informed his identity-stealing son that the human royal is in fact his biological mother, but it also appears he's discovered corporate capitalism in the process. I mean, not only did he hire his own offspring to take over the family business, someone with a woefully unimpressive resume compared to the Kameks and Lakitus of the world who've been putting up with the king's evil schemes for years now, but he's also mastered the art of delegation, as Bowser Jr. is doing all of the hard work while he's lounging around behind the scenes having a relaxing vacation. So yeah, it turns out that the scariest Bowser of them all might just be his new position as ruthless CEO. But all kidding aside, after this insane reveal, it's up to Mario to follow the problem child towards the king's hideout in... You've gotta be kidding me. I don't actually know if I can say the name of the final area in the game on YouTube. Regardless, after visiting multiple new and exciting areas and collecting dozens of Shine Sprites, you'll eventually need to overcome this horrendous boat ride and scale the mountain that shall not be named, before finally coming face to face with Jeff Bezos and his makeshift hot tub. And after conquering the heat and a few well-placed ground pounds, Mario and FLUDD defeat the two Bowsers, rescue the princess, and are finally able to begin their Delfino vacation in full, with Junior acknowledging that Peach, in fact, might not actually be his mother after all, and starting to take revenge on our victorious hero sometime in the future. And that, my friends, is Super Mario Sunshine. And when it comes to Mario games, I have to concede that it's probably the best narrative we're ever going to get out of such a traditionally straightforward series. Yes, most of the plot points are familiar, and yes, somehow Princess Peach manages to get captured and rescued no more than 3 times in one single campaign. Seriously, you're telling me there's not a single Toad in the entire Mushroom Kingdom who does CrossFit or has a black belt? But overall, this is the most ambitious Mario storyline I've ever seen. And with distinctive settings, gorgeous cutscenes, and and well-executed voiceover and dialogue, it all adds up to an admittedly absurd but entirely satisfying premise. Thematically, most Mario titles, like 64, are built around the fundamental idea of exploration and adventure in its purest form. However, while Sunshine was undoubtedly designed with these concepts in mind, I can't help but feel like the main theme in this game is experimentation. Whether it's the aforementioned decision to offer a more story-driven experience, the unfamiliar island and its enemies, or the introduction of Flood, Sunshine is never afraid to take risks either narratively or within its gameplay, and it often rewards players for doing the same. Also, the addition of the Piantas and their role as NPCs within the story are not only unusual for a traditional Mario adventure, but also, to me at least, seem heavily inspired by the memorable characters from Majora's Mask. In fact, the very first thing I wrote down in my notes while exploring Delfino Plaza was how much inspiration I felt it borrowed from that beloved N64 sequel. And so weeks later, while doing my research on the game's development, it was no surprise when I learned that immediately before taking on directing duties for this title, Mr. Koizumi had a major hand in both designing the characters and scenarios found in that game. Now, whether you like the more expansive hub world of the main plaza and the multiple side quests you must complete if you want to 100% this game is another matter entirely. As, let's be honest, unlike Zelda, most platformers are usually at their best when they're designed with a straightforward gameplay experience in mind. However, having played through countless Mario adventures, all with slight variations on the same cookie-cutter formula, I love that they took a different approach this time around. There's no way that at this point in time, Nintendo EAD could have expected to reach the heights of Super Mario 64. The technology at the time just wasn't there to take another massive leap into the future of platforming so soon. So instead, we got something a little different, something more cinematic with a lot more heart and character than I'm used to seeing from this historically safe series. But like I stated, when it comes to a good Mario adventure, what most players desire above all else is fun and creative gameplay. So does Sunshine deliver when it comes to these sacred elements? Well, watch out for the man-eating fish as we dive deeper into the pros. Beginning with the most important mechanics, coming off of 64, I was worried that the troublesome camera from that game would make a return here, but fortunately that wasn't the case. Barring a few minor issues, I barely even noticed the thing, and given how massive some of the game's areas are, honestly that's saying a lot. And when it comes to the more tropical areas found in Sunshine, there's a ton to like. While in my opinion not as varied or quite as memorable as the most famous levels found throughout Peach's Castle, most of what we get here works extremely well. There's a world with a sprawling theme park, an island home to a haunted hotel, and an illuminating forest of fungi and palm trees that really comes alive during the night. In Sunshine, there are only 7 main levels to play through, along with the mountain I can't name and Delfino Plaza itself, with each locale now offering a total of 11 shine sprites to collect, as opposed to the 7 power stars found in each of 64's more intimate excursions. However, despite the well-worn and often derivative tropical elements featured in each of these beachy settings, due to the camera and Mario's new movement options, I found exploring every one of these places infinitely more satisfying than what we got in 64. First and foremost, Flood is amazing. Now I won't lie, I kind of hated the thing at first, especially coming right off of 64. But similarly to my experiences with Cappy and Mario Odyssey, this is one of those instances where the more time you spend with your creative companion, the more rewarding your time with the game will become. If you know how to use Flood in certain ways, you can do everything from increase Mario's speed to organically lengthening his vertical jumps in stylish and satisfying ways. And along with being a unique mechanic that's rarely done well in gaming, this water-propelled backpack also allows for a bit more sensitivity while descending from a jump using the hover nozzle, something which would have made exploring the latter levels in 64 much more forgiving. To me at least, Flood feels like a natural extension of Mario's moveset, and along with increasing his combat abilities, seriously this thing is everything from a Super Soaker to a Jetpack of Death, you'll also eventually unlock specialized upgrades for the Thirsty Gizmo that will allow the lovable parolee to run at Mach speeds, as well as gain massive vertical distance with the turbo and rocket nozzles respectively. Now the good news is that unlike in 64, once you've found and equipped one of these alterations, you're able to keep it until you unbox another power-up or leave the level entirely, wherein it'll reset back to the previously mentioned hover setting. But the bad news is that no matter what you do, it'll always replace the hover nozzle, leaving you without your primary option in maneuverability. And as if that wasn't enough, like many of the power-ups found in a multitude of Mario games, I was disappointed to find that once again, these upgrades are almost always situational, especially the turbo nozzle, which I honestly think I used for 3 sprites in my entire playthrough. Also, chasing Bowser Jr. in a Shadow Mario getup is a surprisingly useful method of player recognition and improvement, as he makes for a skilled teacher in the art of water-based mobility, whether you're subconsciously picking up on his visual prompts or not. And when it comes to the mustachioed platformer himself, the most famous man in video games still has many of his previous abilities. However, instead of the long jump, a move I seriously missed from the days of 64, this time you'll be relying on the slide mechanic to gain horizontal distance in the most satisfying and time-sensitive fashion possible. Personally, my favorite of these new skills is his side somersault, which in combination with the hover nozzle allows players to take non-traditional paths, and in some cases can even help Mario straight up break certain sections throughout the campaign. However, when it comes to many of the game's secret levels, you'll find yourself in isolated environments designed to test your platforming skills without FLUDD to lend a hand. When I first began scaling these ethereal blocks in search of the shine sprites at the end, I'd be lying if I said they weren't a little imposing. Actually, they're so difficult at first that the developers threw players a bone by including easily accessible 1-up mushrooms at the beginning of each stage to avoid mass game overs. But I think like most obstacle courses in the platforming genre, a little trial and error goes a long way, especially in the case of first-time players. And with each failed attempt, I eventually learned how to navigate Mario through these slippery mazes more accurately, which taught me how to move with a higher degree of accuracy throughout the rest of my journey. Eventually, these maps also become home to many of Isle Delfino's secret shine sprites. A clever new gimmick that's easy to miss entirely during your first playthrough, but provides hours of fun after the credits have rolled if you know where to look. There are always 2 per level, and many can be acquired by accomplishing simple tasks such as spraying the right colored bird or a hidden piece of art buried in the sand. But for the most part, you'll be obtaining many of these shines via red coin missions that now inhabit the original secret areas. And with FLUDD now back at your side, it feels incredibly empowering to race through these previously stressful courses with utter indifference to most of the uncompromising structures around you. Now, it is admittedly sometimes a pain to re-access these areas to nab the secretive treasures, with the RNG-based casino entrance being a particular example of this sort of ungraceful backtracking Sunshine forces onto his players. But in hindsight, many of these isolated challenges were some of my favorite episodes in the entire game, and I genuinely feel like by the time I'd completed them all, I was an absolute master with both Mario and FLUDD as a result. Although it should be said that no matter how fun or rewarding they might be, Sunshine has a bizarre fetish for red coin missions, with some worlds featuring this type of task no less than 4 times, which is admittedly a little much even for me. And speaking of multicolored currency, 64's blue coins make a return this time around. However, whereas before they were a nifty way to increase your coin total, they're now a collectible item that can be used to purchase shine sprites from this bear guy in the shop, with each level having 30 to uncover. And look, yes, they're excessive and honestly not worth collecting in full unless you really enjoy vacation photos. But if you simply grab what you're able to as your adventure naturally progresses, I think they're a nice little reward for deeper exploration of these often overwhelming environments. Though screw this sea of lava with like 10 of the damn things. Reaching Bowser's hot tub of doom via this finicky obstacle course is already difficult enough on its own. So being tasked with guiding this floating coffin of death with crazy precise FLUDD controls in order to grab these hellish collectibles was a completionist's worst nightmare. And so troublesome in fact that they single-handedly almost made me give up on 100%ing Sunshine altogether. And when I finally did nab them all, I didn't feel like I earned it through personal improvement or superior navigational skills, but rather that I happened to get somewhat lucky during one of my more than 20 attempts through this river of death. But honestly, aside from this specific batch of blue coins, it was incredibly rewarding to discover 90% of the game's collectibles. And some of the best achievements were made even better with the help of Mario's old friend, Yoshi, who makes his first playable appearance in Super Mario World. And it's while riding this helpful dino that I found my Sunshine adventure to be at its absolute apex in terms of both platforming and exploration. Like in many of his 2D appearances, Mario's prehistoric pal is able to gobble up a multitude of pesky enemies with the press of a button. And alongside his famous flutter jump, Yoshi's made the leap into the 3rd dimension almost flawlessly. Now, for some bizarre reason, the tropical Yoshis who hatch outside the walls of the Mushroom Kingdom not only come in a plethora of warmer colors, but also possess the uncanny ability to spit up their stomach juices like Jeff Goldblum in The Fly.
That's disgusting.
But it's a nifty gimmick that serves to emulate FLUDD's squirt nozzle while also acting as a corrosive agent that'll make quick work of even the toughest piles of sludge. Although at times it is sort of annoying to hatch these eggheads, as you'll need to feed them a specific piece of fruit in order to wake them up. But aside from a few sections that I'll get into a little later on, this juice-loving reptile is a dream to control, and in my opinion only adds to Mario's already robust arsenal in a positive way. Also, I have no idea why, but I loved knocking down enemy beehives, only to end them one by one until they spit out one of the aforementioned blue coins. Maybe that makes me a monster, but man oh man is it satisfying. Moving on to another major change though, I've already touched on this subject a bit, but this GameCube game, like many of its first-party contemporaries, still holds up in terms of presentation incredibly well even today. It's honestly a night and day improvement over what we got in Super Mario 64, and whereas that revolutionary launch title offered charm and familiarity, albeit in a brand new three-dimensional environment, Delfino Island and its gorgeous surroundings possess an unfamiliar identity that makes every level feel fresh and alive. Mr. Koizumi and his team traveled to France and Italy to draw inspiration for many of Sunshine's environments and architecture, and they did a masterful job imparting the imagery and magic of those popular tourist destinations here. And this sense of scale and creative passion finds its way into many of Sunshine's gameplay elements as well, including designated boss fights like Petey Piranha and Phantom Manta, or unparalleled missions like obtaining 8 red coins on the back of Gelato Beach's Sandbird. You can also tell that the team at Nintendo EAD must have been very proud of their water and paint physics because, unsurprisingly, given FLUDD and the beach-like setting, this stuff is everywhere. And the way that it flows and shimmers with a vibrance that most people will only ever experience through pictures comes across as both alluring and impactful at the same time. And in terms of atmosphere and objectives, there is no better looking or more impressive hub world than Delfino Plaza. Acting as an unofficial 8th level unto itself, this memorable locale feels both lived in and undiscovered. And as you obtain more shine sprites and restore light back into the Pianta's lives, you'll be rewarded with more upgrade nozzles, Yoshi, and secret areas for you to test your mettle in this side quest heavy paradise. And oh my god, the music here is perfect. Delfino Plaza with its upbeat accordions is possibly the most memorable song in the game, and perfectly encapsulates the island and its inhabitants while still making me want to test my limits and discover what every new setting still has left to offer. Koji Kondo once again returned to score this GameCube title along with famed composer Shinobu Tanaka, and although it's not as varied or memorable as Super Mario 64 or even World, in my opinion, when certain original compositions like the aforementioned Delfino Plaza theme or brilliant remixes like the Secret Course start to kick in, they leave me inspired to get back up and try my hand at the more difficult sections just to hear how the songs might build and grow alongside my progress. And so, with all of these elements out of the way like a hard to reach blue coin in Noki Bay, it's time to roll up our sleeves and rinse the positives down the drain as we cliff dive into the cons. Let's cut to the chase. This might just be the hardest 3D Mario platformer ever made. While the acrobatic custodian feels infinitely better than he did in 64, thanks in large part to the refined camera system and the incorporation of FLUDD, Mario's movements this time around have a slipperiness to them that often makes tackling the precise platforming needed in Sunshine's most difficult episodes a challenge. The most infamous example of this is the lily pad mission, wherein you're expected to collect 8 red coins along a highly volatile stream of fast-flowing and highly poisonous water. One wrong move and you'll miss a coin, rendering the whole process moot as you'll be forced to start again from scratch. And as if this wasn't bad enough already, in order to access this hidden course, you'll have to guide the hydrophobic Yoshi over Delfino's crystal clear waters via these horrifically glitchy boats that require the utmost care. In fact, even with the sheer difficulty of the red coin mission, and despite losing about a dozen or so lives trying to nab the shine sprite at the end, I must have spent triple the amount of time just trying to make my way to the actual entrance. And in a cruel bit of developmental oversight, if for any reason you opt to use the warp pipe at the end of this toxic river, assuming that you'll be taken back to the beginning of the level like a normal person, you'll instead find yourself back in the Plaza Square, which will of course require you to start over the entire process, Yoshi and all, from absolute zero. And if it's not this particular sequence that'll leave you angry or defeated, don't worry, because between the previously mentioned blue coins before Bowser, balloon popping adventures in Pinna Park, or the pixel-perfect use of Chucksters in one of Pianta Village's secret levels, there's more than enough unapologetic platforming sections to keep you from wanting to 100% this game. Though I will admit, I think many of Sunshine's foulest missions, though problematic for many different reasons, are usually at least programmed with a dash of creativity that would go on to inspire many of the brilliant courses found in later Mario adventures. The pinball machine being a perfect example of a genius concept implemented in a brutal fashion. But it's sadly not only these unforgiving areas that make this adventure difficult at times. For starters, unlike Super Mario 64, and despite having bountiful worlds to explore, Sunshine takes a vastly different approach to progression, and ensures that your campaign will roll out in a much more linear manner than you might be used to. Sure, you can take on most levels in whichever order you want, at least after you've collected enough shines. But from the moment you set foot in Bianco Hills, it becomes all too clear that these maps are not designed to grab shine sprites out of order. In fact, once you've selected a particular episode, it's literally impossible, barring exploits or cheats, which on one hand allows for the developers to really take advantage of certain atmospheres and bosses within specific levels in thorough and imaginative ways that offer players something unique. But on the other, stifling player creativity and forcing set situations in every episode directly conflicts with Sunshine's themes of experimentation, and compared to other more open open games in the series, like 64 and Odyssey, is bound to hurt replayability. It reminds me a lot of Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance, and how the scripted events and scenarios of that galactic adventure made fans of the more open Super Metroid feel restrained as a result. And personally, I feel like in both cases, while the sequel offerings are still extremely memorable, their legacies don't hold the same weight as their more explorative ancestors. And this is likely, at least in part, due to their replayability factors. Now though, moving on to more minor but still annoying issues I discovered during my playthrough, at multiple times I noticed elements of padding that personally I didn't really see the need for. The blue coin stuff, though mostly a positive in my book, is still an egregious example of this, along with the aforementioned multiple red coin episodes. But aside from an abundance of currency related collectathons, I found the shine sprites themselves almost always had an extra step involved. A good example of this is one of the dirty bells in Delfino Plaza, and how once you've made it shine brighter than Torre Vega, instead of the sprite appearing immediately above you, the shine instead floats underneath you, forcing Mario to locate the right sewer system to collect his trophy. And sure, to some players this might seem like fun, but sometimes depending on how far or out of the way the shine might end up, you might have to just spend minutes of your day completing whatever task the game asks for, only to die and be forced to go through everything again, all because of one bad jump on the way to your prize. It'd be like forcing Michael Phelps to swim to the podium to receive his gold medal, which again, maybe to some that sounds utterly brilliant and good on you, but to me at least, I often found this sort of lesson in tedium more annoying than not. And speaking of annoying, remember the 100 coin missions in 64? The ones that led to multiple unnecessary deaths because of the way these golden trinkets were inexplicably obtained? Well, they're back in Sunshine, and due to the way missions are set up in such a specific format, there's a chance that without selecting the right episode, you won't even be able to collect enough coins to unlock the Centennial sprites. Which to me is just crazy. Like, I'm sure getting to that big round 120 number was a requirement for the dev team due to its familiarity within the franchise. But how can you justify implementing such an arbitrary mechanic and waste people's time like this when it's not even an in-game possibility depending on how they choose to play? And of course, because Sunshine loves its padding, these 100 coin shines will fly off to a designated location once the conditions are met. Which, as earlier explained, can sometimes cause pain and suffering if something tragic happens on your way to pick up the star-like MacGuffin. And why does this game enjoy killing players for no reason so much? Lose a race to Il Piantissimo? Dead. Fail to collect all 8 red coins in time? Murdered. Only exploded 13 Bowser balloons on this unbelievably precise roller coaster? Guess I'll die then. There's no in-game explanation for why you have to lose a life for such inconsequential actions. Is it because they wanted to artificially lengthen the game's runtime by almost certainly guaranteeing first-time players will replay multiple episodes over and over again due to the initial challenge posed by some of these ridiculous segments? Well, I can't say for sure, but given everything we know about Sunshine's development and how it seemed to be a sudden pivot from the tech demo showcased at Space World 2000, as well as all of the padding elements I've previously discussed, I think it's a safe bet that the answer to that question is as clear as a Delfino skyline on a summer day. Also, despite having some truly wonderful boss fights throughout the game, why is it that the Bowser fight is so easy? Again, I'm aware that 64 wasn't known for its spectacular battles or anything, but Sunshine is a much more cinematic and modern feeling game. And when I have a harder time against Blooper Duper than I do King Koopa, it leaves me wondering what the heck happened. Like, why is the rocket nozzle the weapon of choice here, while the turbo nozzle is completely non-existent? And hey, maybe even after completing the game, players could unlock the ability to use all nozzles on a rotation, as well as one specialized level designed to put all of Flood's aquatic abilities to good use. Something like the Grandmaster Galaxy in Galaxy 2, except, you know, not ridiculous. Not only would this make for a much better reward than a lame postcard in the credits, but it would also allow for new methods of experimentation and adventuring, which would naturally increase Sunshine's replayability factor. It's like killing 2 birds with 1 Yoshi. But alas, this is all hearsay because nothing like this is actually in the game. And considering I'm not in the business of what ifs, it's difficult to penalize Sunshine for what it doesn't have when it honestly includes so many spectacular and innovative elements that I absolutely adore. So then, with all of my nitpicks out on the table, let's juice the good and the bad into a tasty fruit smoothie that I like to call the final verdict. All in all, Super Mario Sunshine is a game worth celebrating despite its many flaws. And honestly, it's kind of sad that it took Nintendo this long to re-release it. But I'm incredibly glad that they eventually did, because finally I, and many others like me, are able to experience such a beloved adventure that laughs in the face of convention and aims to test die-hard fans in both new and challenging ways. The addition of Flood keeps platforming fresh and creative, The worlds, despite being unfamiliar, shine in personality and the sheer volume of satisfying secrets to uncover, and the voice acting, pitch-perfect scenario writing, and computer-generated cutscenes all combine to create a cinematic experience unlike any other within the series. The game also features a wonderful cast of memorable characters and provides players with more collectibles and a better hub world than any of Mario's previous campaigns. At the same time though, Mario Sunshine is often an exercise in patience and features some of the worst examples of padding I've seen from a franchise that prioritizes fun and adventure over anything else. And that, coupled with a more linear mission system and hundreds of blue coins to collect, means that not only are most players not going to want to complete this platformer, but that they'll likely be less motivated to return to Isle Delfino for another working vacation anytime soon. Throw in a disappointing final boss fight and completion bonus, some questionable design mechanics like dying because you lost a race, and everyone's favorite not green dinosaur into the mix, and I'm left awarding Super Mario Sunshine with an A-. It's an ambitious adventure that will absolutely reward you for putting time and effort into its many innovative mechanics. And despite its shortcomings, it's an experimental breath of fresh air for those sick of the same old platforming tropes and makes for an infinitely more compelling experience than its much more celebrated predecessor. So if you're like me and love all things Super Mario but never managed to check out this particular offering, then give it a chance, whether through the original or the 3D All-Stars collection for the Nintendo Switch. Because honestly, so long as you play Sunshine for its gameplay, narrative, and distinctive flavor, as opposed to a sense of reward through completion, you'll leave this tropical adventure one satisfied customer. Well, another Super Mario review in the books, and I gotta say, I enjoyed this one a lot more than I thought I would, especially compared to 64. That being said though, the next installment in my 3D All-Stars series is Mario Galaxy, a game I've considered among my personal top 3 video games ever made, and having not played it for over a decade now, I'm curious how I'll respond to it this time. But that'll do it for today's review, so drop a like if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell for more good content, and if you haven't done so already, and finally, let me know your thoughts on Super Mario Sunshine in the comment section down below. And as I always say, happy hunting, baby rhinos. Peace. As always, I've got to give the biggest shout out to my channel members who keep me steady during this insane time in my life. I appreciate all of you, and if you would like to become a member and get early access to content among other great perks, the link to join is down below. Thanks again, and please stay safe out there, my friends.